Welcome to Informed. I'm REB-KEY. Today we're going to talk about taxation in the state of Minnesota. And we're going to talk about what KSTP and WCCO reported about a bingo hall in Roseville, Minnesota, and get you some real insight on what you should understand about that whole process. You just got a spec and you didn't get any real insight on what is going on with charitable gaming, which I favor because it does a lot of good for our communities, but there's some changes that should be made as well. But you have to realize when we look at charitable gaming in the state of Minnesota, all these media outlets, these big media outlets, have a viewpoint that they don't want to expose, like good old REB-KEY here at Informed or Informed TV, and why Klobuchar and the 5 networks in the Twin Cities, including public TV, don't want me on air. I know how to be there, but I have to have an access to a channel and that they keep giving to these profiteers and speculators, and allow the translators like CTV and Redwood Falls TV and Granite Falls TV and Wilmer UHF TV and Selective TV here in Alexandria, that we can't have anybody on the airways that is going to dig into what the establishment is up to. In today's program here on good old KNUJ, we're going to try to give you some insight on what KSTP and WCCO should have told you about the picture of charitable gaming, and not just the fraud that went on by a few naive and corrupt employees when they got around too much money. And here's the thing we're going to talk about today. What is the highest tax rate that any business pays in Minnesota? Well, most of you involved in business at all or pay a high rate, it's 9.8%. But when it comes to charitable gaming, we're going to tell you today, and listen well, the Gambling Control Board and this mechanism that our governor and our legislature put together to pay off U.S. bank stadium bonds and take care of the good old Wilfs and listen to their favorite person, Lester, on what they had to do or they were going to lose the stadium, and or lose the Vikings, I should say. And so what we're going to talk about here is taxation and rates. Do you realize the Gambling Control Board that monitors gaming in the state of Minnesota shows a highest tax rate? I think it's about 37%. You heard me right, 37%. But if you do FASB accounting rules, people, that tax rate about doubles. You heard me right. So we have businesses, nonprofit businesses, that are paying in excess of 70% of their earnings after pull tabs and bingo and that type of thing. It's mainly pull tabs is where the real money is. And here's what I want you to think about this 21st day of September when I'm recording this in the afternoon. Gross receipts in 2017, fiscal 2017, we're the only place we've got the numbers yet. You know, the books have been closed since June 30th, but we have a system that I believe has been set up. The final reporting of gambling, charitable gambling income doesn't come until November. Now, there's a way to get some little insight in here, but I'm still waiting for the Minnesota Department of Revenue as well as Minnesota Management Budget to get me some good numbers. But, you know, when I'm not on TV anymore, they just look at me, well, we don't have to do anything for that guy. We're just going to wait till the final number. And when it comes to numbers like this, they're always going to be a few dollars off one way or another and have to adjust the next year. But the reality is, what I want to talk to you about today is a system that needs some more oversight, that these charities have their own organization, Allied Charities of Minnesota, and I believe there should be an organization like that. And I actually believe every organization that is involved in charitable gaming should belong to an organization like that, but not in its present structure or its present people. Why? Because there's two edges. I've talked to these guys. They could have had me in the Twin Cities, and we could have made this a major issue in the primary election of the state of Minnesota, but they didn't want to spend any money. They wanted to go back and send Al, a nice guy, but an inefficient lobbyist, and proven that over a number of years. The board the same way. You know, when people get a title today, they're an expert, of course, about everything once they get a title. And I've traveled to the Gambling Control Board on my own nickel, and I've been to Allied Charity meeting finally I got to, and I've talked to Al, and I've sent emails to the board. And so when I'm talking about charitable gaming, people, and I've had it on my TV deal when I was on TV here for 3 years in Alexandria, I know what I'm talking about. And when I say that some things need to be changed and changed now, you can bank on it. Here's what I want you to think about. Relating to the two reports you have, but then looking at the real picture. Gambling in fiscal 17, 1.7 billion. I believe Tom at the Gambling Control Board told me it's going to be over 2 billion gross industry this year. And that's why I say it's high time that we make the gambling, charitable gambling, and the deal that was set up to please the Wilfs and Lester needs to be front and center in every House race in the state of Minnesota. And as I get into these numbers a little more, people, you're going to see quickly what I'm talking about. And here's the accounting. First of all, the accounting has to change. But we don't have a legislative auditor that's meaningful anyway, or attorney general, or a state auditor, or legislative leaders that would dig into this. Like, I'm going to give you a little tip of the iceberg today so you can talk to your friends about it. Anyway, if you go to gross receipts annual report, it's about 2/3 of the way across the page. Go to gross receipts. That's where the real information is for a layman, for sure, to look at. Anyway, I'm going to run these numbers quick, and bear in mind that's why it should be TV or just be a monitor. You could watch this stuff as I'm talking. But in 17, they had 1.7 billion in gross receipts, less prizes of $1.447 billion, and net receipts. In other words, we're just taking the money, the gross, less what we handed out prizes, and call it net receipts. And I think in business, what is the term? Adjusted gross or something like that before you start taking out additional expenses. But anyway, what we want to focus on here today is the net receipts were a little over 275 million, $276 million. Less allowable expenses, about 50%. So they ended up with $138 million of expenses, which left what the Gambling Control Board, if you're watching this on an informed TV channel, and my pointing my finger on my little old computer here, the net profit was $138 million left for charities. But the way we do taxation under the Gambling Control Board rules, and our governor and legislator, this great bipartisan thing to make sure the NFL and the Wilfs got their brand new stadium, even though we had a brand new one on the university, and we just had a brand new one on the old Humphrey Dome, where we could have played on the warm days at the Gopher Stadium, on the cold days played in the old Metrodome. Most of us just watch it on TV anyway, and owned the damn Vikings. That's what we should have did with the power of the state of Minnesota, just like Green Bay does. But anyway, here's what I want you to understand when you look at that gross receipts annual report. We had lawful expenditure purposes they talk about. The charitable contributions, and then include other PLE. The charity got to keep in a gross amount to do their stuff and take care of the buildings and that type of thing was $65 million in 17. Here's the interesting thing, people. The state of Minnesota on state tax on lawful gaming net receipts was what? $63,462,000. So when we talk about tax rates, if you have net profits of 138 million, folks, and the business itself only gets to keep 65 million, and the state of Minnesota gets, for income tax, gets 63 million plus another 3 million for local, federal, and unrelated business income tax and license and fees. Aren't these charities, the VFWs, the Lions, the Elks, the Eagles, the hockey associations that was talked about on our two Twin City TV outlets, aren't they paying over 50% tax? You damn right they're paying over 50% tax. But at the same time, the Gambling Control Board, the governor, and our legislators, all of them, Republican, Democrat, say the tax rate is 23%, which is, we're pushing 3 times what the businesses pay, what the richest people in Minnesota pay. And we say, well, Al, this is for gambling. This is for sin. You know, I know you people know them. They hardly ever drink or smoke or ever party, you know. So let's look at some of the things in Mankato. They do a lot more gambling over there, but and around the state. But should we not be looking at this? Should we not be questioning our legislatures on this thing? You cockeyed right, we should be doing this. And then I want to spin down a little bit here to what the bottom line shows when you take all these charities that the Gambling Control Board watches. Tom over there, the Gambling Control Board. I'm going to put my old specs on so you can see. We're going to repeat the numbers a little bit, but you go along the bottom there. The charity and others is something they get to keep because they fix their building or depreciation, but most of the charities don't get to take advantage of that. But anyway, the charities, what they took home for doing good in their community was $54 million, almost $55 million. And then they got to utilize $10 million of gambling money for upkeep and buildings and that type of thing. Not rent, but special projects on buildings and depreciation. And then, listen to this, what they show on the bottom line for taxes and fees with a net profit that we had before of $138 million, the state of Minnesota mainly gets almost 70 million. So the charity gets 54 million to do good in the community, and then when you talk to the Gambling Control Board or the governor's office or legislatures, they say, well, that $10 million, Al, that goes to the good of the charity. Well, good of the community, just to keep up their building. Let's do FASB rules in accounting immediately for charitable gaming in the state of Minnesota. But just think of that. The state of Minnesota, if you have $138 million, if you follow FASB rules that would be considered profit, how can you give the state of Minnesota, mainly in state income tax, $70 million, and the charity himself only gets to spend $55 million? It's outrageous what's going on there, but of course our TV networks, when you don't allow a true independent like Informed TV on Twin Cities or the Mankato Tower that you rural electric people control, or you people that watch can contribute $7 a month for not getting a right to see the truth from an independent station. I want you to go, and if you're looking over my shoulder a little bit on the Informed TV channel, if you're concerned enough to go there to look, or just go to the Minnesota Gambling Control Board, you can see what I'm talking about. But then I want you to scroll down and get into the real nitty-gritty on the gross receipts of gaming. Gross receipts. That's where the real picture is. And I want to talk to you of how, when we have a state government, that the first and foremost, we got to take care of the NFL, the Wilfs, and we got to pay off those stadium bonds without everybody contributing or having an additional tax on the people that actually use the stadium. But anyway, so let's look at the biggest organization in the state of Minnesota as far as gaming is concerned. Merrick Incorporated Vendies Heights, I can't say that name, but Vendota's Heights. Their gross receipts in 17 were $25 million. Their net receipts, after they deducted the prizes, which the charities don't get to keep, of course, was $3,736,000. Their total expenses for the year, remember that bingo story, you can see it online, or those two WCCOs and our KSTP's website, and I recommend you go on there. It gives you some insight, but it doesn't even give you the slightest clue of what was really going on. Their total expenses were just about $2 million. In other words, 51.5%, which is in line. I think the state requires them, they can't go much over 50% or they get a fine, so all of them stay in that range. But the charity itself, that I would contend had all these net receipts less their expenses, the charity only got to keep $562,000. Only got to keep $562,000, people. But what happens when you go over to the good old state of Minnesota, the governor and his taxation views, and our legislators, when it comes to taxing non-profit charities in the state of Minnesota? They paid $1.260 million. They paid over twice in state taxes as the charity itself kept for the year. And you can go right down the line. And then here's an interesting thing of saying, well, gee, Al, them legislators, they can't keep up with everything. You know, Julie Rosen down there south of you guys in Mankato, I call her and Governor Dayton the Bonnie and Clyde of the stadium funding group. And then they got the four hit men, four hit people, probably I should say, are four legislative leaders when we're talking Gazelka, Bach, Doubt, and Hortman, isn't it? The majority leader, minority leader, Speaker of the House, and minority leader of the House. Those guys are up to it in their ankles, are up to their eyeballs in it, in taxation of their own local charities. And here I'm going to give you an example because it's the first one on there that I can hit. The Irving Community Center on the edge of Duluth, and if it isn't in Bach's district, it's right on there. He's in Duluth all the time with the big Democrats there. In that case, they did $14 million worth of gaming. Their net receipts, instead of showing net profit here, of $2.2 million. Their allowed expenses were $600. Let's see, so I'm in the right line. Duluth was allowable expenses a little over $1.1 million, or 50%, which is in line. Here's what Senator Bach's own area of the state if it's not in his district, but it fringes right down there, the charity got to keep $305,000, people. What did the good old state of Minnesota get? Almost $800,000. And the accounting system they use shows that the taxation rate was 35%. Well, in reality, you have to double that, or about double it one way or another. And so you don't think I'm here just picking on Democrats or the governor here. Let's go down a little bit further. I think it's on this same page. Maybe I got to go to towns here. Gazelka, the Republican, East Gull Lake Confidence Learning Center. So we're talking about things that we should be supporting. And we look over here at Gazelka's own area, if I'm following the right line, I think I am, shows that his charity kept $304,000. In other words, 15% of the proceeds. They got to keep 15%. Then we just go down the line. Remember, these Republicans are all anti-tax, right? Right. Well, yeah, bull. As long as somebody else pays it rather than their rich buddies. The taxation for Gazelka's East Gull Lake Confidence Learning Center, prime charity, the state of Minnesota took home $668,000 in this process. $668,000. Gazelka's own charity on the west side of Brainerd there got to keep $305,000. And they listed the taxation at 33%. Well, people, you got to double it, don't you? Of course you do. And then we go down, and Horton's got one. I don't know if that's at Coon Rapids. She's got one. I should have checked here before we started. I had issues all day long trying to work on this farm stuff. So you get a decent farm policy that doesn't break the taxpayer and still takes care of our farmers. And so make sure your local paper, New Ulm Journal and Mankato Free Press, carry the letter to the editor. I sent them, even though my terrible writing, the numbers are there that you taxpayers as well as you farmers have a right to see. So call the New Ulm Journal and the Mankato Free Press and any other paper you got. They've all been put a letter on farm policy that helps our farmers and quits all this subsidy crap. But anyway, when we look at Little Zimmerman, Minnesota, that was on the news this week on something as well. Little Zimmerman, Minnesota, Speaker of the House, the big powerful position. His organization, the charity, his fire department, in other words, got to keep $190,000 for equipment, trucks, or whatever they do with it, which is fine. Then the good old state of Minnesota, they got $310,000. And yet the Speaker of the House says, well, we're going to list it as 33%. How can the charity, if they followed FASB accounting rules rather than politician schemed accounting policy and taxation process. Of course, we have no attorney general in this state, or we have no auditor or legislative auditor that people like me can go to and say, do something. No, that's Alan, you don't understand how the process has to work. Well, I damn well understand how the process should work. And the only way it's going to work is you get me on TV in the Twin Cities and Mankato and around the area, and we'll show you things, not from a partisan standpoint, but from a factual financial standpoint that you have a right to see before you vote. The number one issue in this election, these legislative house races should be what? Charitable gaming, and how they schemed to make sure the Wilfs got everything they wanted, and the people that actually got the tickets and stuff can get robbed blind by the NFL and the Wilfs on seat fees and all that, but when it comes to paying off the bonds, we're going to take it out of the mission of the charities like VFW clubs, Legions, Eagles, Elks, hockey associations, data trails for snowmobiles and all that. We're going to take it out of their mission, and because they're not going to say nothing, because we legislators said, you want gambling, you either do it our way or the highway. We'll just take it away in total. And then all these organizations, Education Minnesota, MnSchool, our technical colleges, state colleges, and our University of Minnesota, and of course our church colleges, all these organizations, you have to be politically correct and protect the establishment. And it wouldn't be polite to show the common people of Minnesota how they scammed and schemed to get that stadium, rather than just buy the cockeyed team, just like Green Bay did, and then use the Gopher Stadium on the nice days and the old Metrodome on the stormy days. But anyway, let's keep going on this stuff. We're running out of time. And if you go down to Hortman, I think her name is, she's got an organization, I think it's in Coon Rapids or one of them. I finally found that it's just the same crap there. And so you have to understand, people, when you don't allow an independent press like Informed TV and radio, you don't know about this kind of stuff. Why? Because I don't get a cut out of this. The stadium bonds are being funded out of the hard work of our local charities, and that's outrageous. And what I'm saying, I think 72 million came into the state last year. 36.9 goes into the general fund, which is ridiculous in the first rate. These guys should pay an unrelated business income tax of 9.8% and be done with it. And Allied Charities doing a lousy job for their groups, but who's really doing a con job of the good old people and the charities and the communities is our legislature and governor. And you can take that to the bank once you look at the Gambling Control Board numbers under gross expenditures and look down. How could these people allow to put up with this? Why? Because they've been programmed by academia. You gotta be politically correct. You gotta protect these people. You're not smart enough to understand how important the NFL is to the world. Thanks for listening to Informed TV. I'm Alan Roebke, and you need to go to the Gambling Control Board and see the facts.